Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Russia tonight, the first major world leader to visit the country since President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine began more than a year ago. The three-day meeting comes just after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin on alleged war crimes in Ukraine. CB News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson is with us for tonight's top story. Abigail?
Well, President Xi Jinping seeks for his visit to be a fruitful one, although it's also drawing intense suspicion from the West as it shows deepening ties between Russia and China. The trip is seen as a major show of support for Putin, who has been isolated internationally for his invasion of Ukraine. China has also been reluctant to join other major powers in sanctioning Russia since the war started. The war in Ukraine will be a major topic of discussion between the two leaders, with both blaming the West for the conflict and Xi calling for a peace proposal that favors Russia.
This war could actually end right now if Russia would withdraw its troops from the country. We hope that President Xi will press President Putin to cease bombing Ukrainian cities, hospitals, and schools, to halt the war crimes and atrocities, and to withdraw all his troops. But we are concerned that instead, China will reiterate calls for a ceasefire that leaves Russian forces inside Ukraine's sovereign territory.
Western countries will also be watching for signs of China increasing political, financial, and military support of Russia following this week's visit. The U.S. plans to sanction China if lethal aid is supplied to Russia for the war.
We encourage President Xi to play a constructive role by speaking with President Zelensky, which he has not done since Russia launched this invasion. Because China, quite frankly, we believe, should hear directly from the Ukrainians and not just from the Russians.
The United States claims that if this visit ends in the two countries calling for a ceasefire, that will be unacceptable, claiming all it would do is ratify Russia's conquest thus far. Jenna?
All right, Abby, thank you very much. And here with us now is Rebecca Koffler, former DIA intelligence officer and author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. Rebecca, welcome. Great to have you with us this evening. So, this strategic alliance between Russia and China has been growing for some time now. This is President Xi's first trip to Moscow since Putin launched Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Do you see this as a pinnacle so far in the relationship between these two countries?
Yes, indeed. The relationship has been deepening even for the past year, but it's much more than that. The visit is not only about the potential peace plan, which is just a simple charade from Xi. He's not interested in peace in Ukraine, but it's also a slap on the face to Washington and to the Europeans who have just issued an arrest warrant for Putin. So both Russia and China are just defiant, and they're continuing to take action to transform the world in order to shift the balance of power to their advantage and away from the United States.
Yeah, we've seen President Xi on the world stage brokering deals, billing himself as a peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine. And then he also brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. What do you make of that? And is a Chinese brokered peace deal possible with Russia and Ukraine? You say China is not interested in peace here.
No, it's not interested. And but what China is doing is just basically playing a charade. This is all for optics. As you said, Xi has been playing the big power diplomacy. That's the Chinese sort of narrative that they are propagating in the world, which is very consistent with China's grand plan to replace the United States as the dominant power, both economically, militarily, diplomatically, by 2049. So that's what he's doing. But in reality, China is highly incentivized to continue fueling this war in Ukraine. Here's why. The Chinese are only happy to have two of their top adversaries, perceived adversaries, Russia and the United States, deplete their combat arsenals by waging this proxy war in Ukraine. And so Xi Jinping is just simply elated to let this happen, and he will likely approve lethal aid to Russia so Putin can continue his barbaric war on Ukraine.
Rebecca, both leaders are accused of crimes against humanity. The International Criminal Court issuing a warrant for Putin's arrest last week over forced deportation of children, and for President Xi calls on the ICC to hold him accountable for the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity against the Uyghur people. How dire, Rebecca, are the global consequences of a team-up between Russia and China?
Well, absolutely dire. Look at it this way. The Chinese and the Russians actually have active warfighting doctrines to wage war with the United States if the U.S. intervenes in Russian war in Ukraine, and if the United States intervenes in the military incursion the Xi is planning into Taiwan. Both have concluded that the United States is incapable of waging a two-front war. We do have the doctrine, but because we have been depleting our own combat readiness, eroding our combat arsenal in the war in Ukraine, we simply cannot do that. The military analysts like myself are assessing that we could run out of weaponry in the first 2 weeks. And so both Putin and Xi know this, and they are continuing to make their plans. Xi is actually transitioning China onto a warfighting footing on preparations for this war. And Putin continues to wage his war of attrition by mobilizing more Russian troops and acquiring more weaponry from China, potentially Iran, North Korea, and also fielding their own Russian weapons.
All right, her book is Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. Rebecca Koffler, great to have you with us this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Jenna.